The chaos inside Westminster today was unlike anything Britain has seen in generations. Keir Starmer, the sitting Prime Minister, completely lost control during a furious clash with Nigel Farage. It was a breakdown that ended with humiliation, shattered authority, and the image that will define his career. A Prime Minister outmaneuvered, outclassed, and left powerless before the nation. What unfolded was not just another fiery debate in the Commons, it was a political earthquake that has thrown the entire system into turmoil and left the future of British politics hanging by a thread. It all began at Prime Minister's Questions, a weekly tradition where the leader of the country is meant to display control, confidence, and clarity. But on this day, Starmer walked into a chamber that was already bracing for impact. Nigel Farage had signaled for days that he was ready to launch his most devastating challenge yet to the government's credibility on immigration and sovereignty. The atmosphere in the Commons was tense, thick with anticipation, and the green benches were packed. Every MP knew something extraordinary was coming, but none could have predicted how explosive the events would become. At exactly 12:15, Farage rose from his seat with calm determination. He held no placards, raised no voice, but carried with him evidence and statistics that would cut deep into Labour's already fragile reputation on immigration. He began in a measured tone. "Mr. Speaker, the British people were promised control of their borders. They were promised security. Instead, they've been given chaos." He paused, letting his words hang heavy in the chamber before delivering the devastating numbers. Tens of thousands crossing the Channel, billions in taxpayer money drained into migrant hotels, and leaked reports of secret talks with Brussels to rejoin EU migration schemes. Each line was sharp, precise, and undeniable. The effect was immediate. On Labour's benches, MPs shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their heads, others stared straight ahead as if bracing for impact. On the Conservative side, whispers of approval could be heard, their faces lighting up at the rare sight of a Prime Minister being dismantled on live television. Starmer's face reddened with each word, his eyes darting between Farage and the Speaker, his body tense like a man cornered. This was no ordinary exchange of political blows. This was a systematic demolition of the government's narrative. Farage drove his message deeper. The people voted for sovereignty, not surrender. They voted for control, not betrayal. What this government has delivered is nothing short of a lie. His words echoed through the chamber, not shouted but spoken with icy precision. For the watching public, the contrast was unmistakable. One man, calm, factual, in control, the other visibly unraveling under the weight of his failures. Then came the breaking point. Starmer could no longer contain himself. He rose from his seat suddenly, his body language no longer statesmanlike but raw, furious, and desperate. His finger shook as he pointed across the benches, his voice cracking as he shouted, "How dare you! How dare you accuse this government of betrayal when all you do is poison this country with division?" The chamber froze. This was not the composed Prime Minister Britain expected to see. This was an eruption of anger that shocked even his closest allies. Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle called for order, his voice stern and commanding, but Starmer pushed forward. His words turned more personal, more vicious. He accused Farage of being a disgrace, of tearing Britain apart, of having no legitimacy to speak on behalf of the people. MPs sat in stunned silence. Even the rowdy backbenchers, who normally thrive on political fireworks, were frozen. For many, it was the first time in their careers that they had witnessed a Prime Minister unravel so publicly. The situation spiraled further as Starmer refused to heed the Speaker's repeated orders to sit. His voice grew louder, his movements more erratic. Every camera captured the spectacle. The supposed leader of Britain transformed into a man consumed by rage, blind to the rules of the chamber, blind even to his own destruction. The pressure had been building for months, plunging approval ratings, a restless party, and growing fears about Reform UK's rise. In that moment, all of it boiled over into one catastrophic display. Finally, Speaker Hoyle invoked Standing Order 43, the rarely used parliamentary rule granting him the authority to remove any member who refuses to maintain order, even the Prime Minister. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Security officers began moving forward, and for the first time, Starmer's fury gave way to disbelief. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice stripped of authority. But the speaker was resolute. "I am entirely serious. This chamber will not be reduced to chaos by its own leader. You must withdraw immediately." As the reality sank in, Starmer's shoulders slumped. His MPs offered no lifeline, no words of support. He was utterly alone. 2 guards flanked him as he made his way out, every step captured by flashing cameras, every second broadcast across the world. It was the image of power collapsing in real time, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom being escorted from his own chamber. And then the final blow came from Farage, delivered with calm clarity. This is what happens when leaders cannot defend their failures. They break down. They lash out. Britain deserves better. The aftermath of Starmer's removal spread like wildfire, transforming a dramatic parliamentary clash into a full-blown political crisis. Within minutes, the footage of the Prime Minister being escorted out by security officers was clipped, shared, and replayed millions of times across social media platforms. Hashtags like #PM thrown out, #Starmer meltdown, and #Farage destroys trended globally within the hour. What began as a shocking parliamentary moment quickly escalated into one of the most humiliating collapses of authority ever witnessed by a British leader. Commentators struggled to find historical parallels. Nothing in living memory compared to the sight of a sitting Prime Minister losing his composure so completely and being physically removed from the very chamber he was supposed to command. News outlets scrambled to adjust their programming. Every major network, both domestic and international, interrupted broadcasts to replay the scene on a loop. BBC commentators spoke in hushed tones, calling it an unprecedented breakdown in parliamentary order. Sky News labeled it a constitutional earthquake. Across the Atlantic, American networks treated it as breaking news of the highest order. CNN's ticker ran, "British PM ejected from Parliament amid chaos." Fox News called it the collapse of leadership in real time. Even Al Jazeera and RT ran extended coverage, analyzing what the humiliation meant for Britain's standing in the world. But while global media framed the event as historic and destabilizing, the domestic political impact was far more brutal. Pollsters moved quickly, launching snap surveys in the hours after the Commons' eruption. The results were devastating. Starmer's personal approval ratings, already fragile, collapsed by double digits overnight. A YouGov poll showed public confidence in his leadership falling to just 21%. Words like unhinged, unstable, and embarrassing dominated focus group responses. Even among traditional Labour supporters, there was visible anger. Many felt betrayed, not because they opposed passion, but because the display of fury revealed weakness rather than strength. On the streets of Manchester, Birmingham, and Leeds, Labour's historical strongholds, local radio phone-ins captured the mood. Callers described Starmer as finished and out of control. One lifelong Labour voter summed up the mood grimly. If he can't keep calm in Parliament, how can he keep calm when negotiating with world leaders? He's made us a laughingstock. Across northern constituencies, the same sentiment was repeated. The meltdown wasn't just a political embarrassment. It was a direct challenge to Labour's claim of being the steady hand Britain needed in turbulent times. Reform UK, on the other hand, seized the moment with ruthless efficiency. Nigel Farage wasted no time. Just hours after the Prime Minister's ejection, he stood outside Westminster and addressed the press. Cameras captured him standing calmly, his demeanor a sharp contrast to Starmer's rage. His message was simple, yet devastating. What we witnessed today was not strength. It was weakness. Britain cannot afford leaders who lose control under pressure. We need calm, steady leadership to face the challenges ahead. Clips of the statement went viral instantly, with supporters hailing it as proof of Farage's readiness for power. Inside the Labour Party, panic spread like wildfire. Emergency meetings were called behind closed doors, with MPs whispering about the unthinkable, whether Keir Starmer could continue as Prime Minister after such a public breakdown. Angela Rayner, his deputy, was reportedly furious. Sources close to her claimed she felt betrayed and humiliated by Starmer's actions. Senior Labour figures like Yvette Cooper and Wes Streeting began receiving quiet phone calls, MPs asking whether they would consider stepping into leadership if the situation spiraled further. In hushed corridors and encrypted WhatsApp chats, the survival of Starmer's premiership was openly questioned. The Conservative Party smelled blood immediately. Rishi Sunak, now leading the opposition, delivered a scathing statement within hours. "A prime minister who cannot control himself cannot control the country," he declared. Tory strategists called for a no-confidence vote, eager to force an early election and capitalize on Labour's implosion. Their messaging was clear. Britain could not afford a leader who breaks down under pressure, especially at a time of economic crisis, rising immigration, and international uncertainty. Yet it wasn't only the opposition parties circling. Constitutional experts raised alarms about the unprecedented situation. Professor Vernon Bogdanor, one of Britain's leading constitutional scholars, warned that Starmer's removal under Standing Order 43 raised serious questions. Could a prime minister who had been formally ejected from the Commons still command the authority necessary to govern? Was this simply a moment of lost control, or did it signify an unfitness for office that demanded a formal inquiry? Legal scholars debated whether the meltdown constituted a breach of the ministerial code, which required ministers, including the prime minister, to uphold standards of conduct befitting their office. While experts argued, the silence from number 10 deepened the crisis. For nearly 48 hours after the incident, Starmer made no public appearances, no press conferences, no interviews. The vacuum allowed his enemies to define the narrative. Reform UK flooded social media with clips of the meltdown, cutting Starmer's fury against Farage's calm composure. Conservative MPs piled on, branding the Prime Minister unfit to lead. Newspapers across the spectrum printed brutal headlines. The Daily Mail screamed, "Starmer loses it." The Telegraph wrote, "Humiliation for PM as security removes him." Even Labour-friendly outlets struggled. The Guardian called it a moment of madness, while the Mirror asked bluntly, "Is he finished?" International reaction only worsened the humiliation. European leaders expressed concern about Britain's political stability. France's Emmanuel Macron offered a carefully worded statement about the importance of steady partners in turbulent times. Germany's Olaf Scholz, when asked about the incident, diplomatically stressed the need for composure in leadership. Across the Commonwealth, doubts spread. Australia's Prime Minister paused awkwardly before affirming confidence in Britain's leadership. In Canada, officials expressed unease about ongoing trade negotiations. The meltdown wasn't just a domestic crisis, it was eroding Britain's reputation on the world stage. Britain could not afford a leader who breaks down under pressure, especially at a time of economic crisis, rising immigration, and international uncertainty. Yet it wasn't only the opposition parties circling. Constitutional experts raised alarms about the unprecedented situation. Professor Vernon Bogdanor, one of Britain's leading constitutional scholars, warned that Starmer's removal under Standing Order 43 raised serious questions. Could a prime minister who had been formally ejected from the Commons still command the authority necessary to govern? Was this simply a moment of lost control, or did it signify an unfitness for office that demanded a formal inquiry? Legal scholars debated whether the meltdown constituted a breach of the ministerial code, which required ministers, including the Prime Minister, to uphold standards of conduct befitting their office. While experts argued, the silence from number 10 deepened the crisis. For nearly 48 hours after the incident, Starmer made no public appearances, no press conferences, no interviews. The vacuum allowed his enemies to define the narrative. Reform UK flooded social media with clips of the meltdown, cutting Starmer's fury against Farage's calm composure. Conservative MPs piled on, branding the Prime Minister unfit to lead. Newspapers across the spectrum printed brutal headlines. The Daily Mail screamed, "Starmer loses it." The Telegraph wrote, "Humiliation for PM as security removes him." Even Labour-friendly outlets struggled. The Guardian called it a moment of madness, while the Mirror asked bluntly, "Is he finished?" International reaction only worsened the humiliation. European leaders expressed concern about Britain's political stability. France's Emmanuel Macron offered a carefully worded statement about the importance of steady partners in turbulent times. Germany's Olaf Scholz, when asked about the incident, diplomatically stressed the need for composure in leadership. Across the Commonwealth, doubts spread. Australia's Prime Minister paused awkwardly before affirming confidence in Britain's leadership. In Canada, officials expressed unease about ongoing trade negotiations. The meltdown wasn't just a domestic crisis, it was eroding Britain's reputation on the world stage. Frustration into sharp, cutting words stood his ground with unwavering confidence. He accused Starmer of betraying the people's trust, pointing to his constant flip-flopping on Brexit, his backroom deals with EU leaders, and his failure to address the everyday struggles of working-class citizens. Starmer, visibly shaken, attempted to regain control, but each attempt only further highlighted his weakness. His words were drowned out by the sheer force of Farage's arguments that resonated not just within the chamber, but across the entire country. This was no longer a political debate. It was the moment where authority itself seemed to shift, with the balance of power sliding away from Starmer's hands. In that tense environment, the opposition benches roared with approval as Farage pressed forward, exposing contradictions in Labour's immigration stance and their silence on crime surges across the country. He accused Starmer of putting ideology above the safety and prosperity of the British people, and the weight of those accusations hung heavily in the air. Starmer, uncharacteristically rattled, lashed out with anger, raising his voice in a desperate attempt to silence the growing momentum against him. But the louder he shouted, the weaker he appeared, a man grasping at authority that was slipping away in real time. Members of his own party exchanged uneasy glances, as though realizing that their leader was no longer the steady figure they hoped would carry them through turbulent times, but rather a symbol of chaos and indecision. The moment had transformed into more than a verbal battle. It was a public unraveling of the Prime Minister before the eyes of the nation. Beyond the chamber walls, the ripple effects of this clash were immediate. The public, already frustrated with rising costs, housing shortages, and the sense that their voices were being ignored, latched on to Farage's fiery words. Social media exploded with clips of the confrontation, painting Starmer as a leader collapsing under pressure. Hashtags calling for his resignation surged to the top of trending lists, and commentators across networks declared this confrontation as one of the most brutal demolitions of a sitting prime minister in decades. Farage had tapped into a current of discontent that had been simmering quietly, and with his direct and unapologetic style, he had given it a voice that was impossible to ignore. The chaos inside Parliament reflected the chaos spreading throughout the country, a chaos that was no longer abstract but tangible, felt in every household, every workplace, and every community tired of being neglected by the ruling class. Meanwhile, Labour's ranks showed the first signs of collapse. Some MPs whispered about leadership challenges, while others considered defecting to rival parties to protect their own political futures. The party that had once prided itself on discipline and unity now seemed fragile, torn between loyalty to their leader and the undeniable truth unfolding before them. Starmer was losing the fight. In contrast, Farage stood taller than ever, his words striking like lightning, leaving aftershocks that no one in Westminster could ignore. He called out Labour's hypocrisy on free speech, their endless delays in addressing border security, and the economic policies that were driving businesses into the ground. Each point landed with devastating precision, painting Starmer not just as ineffective, but as an outright danger to the stability of the nation. For the first time, it felt as though the man who had fought for years on the fringes of politics was now at the center of power, reshaping the battlefield before everyone's eyes. The confrontation turned into something historic, one that observers would later describe as a turning point for British politics. Farage's relentless pursuit of truth clashed with Starmer's desperate attempt to cling to power, creating an image of chaos that would haunt Labour for years to come. By the end of the exchange, it was clear that the chamber no longer belonged to the Prime Minister. The authority had shifted. The control was gone. And as Farage delivered his final words with thunderous conviction, the House erupted, not in support of Starmer, but in recognition that the tide had turned, and the future of the United Kingdom now stood on the edge of dramatic change.